You need to leave. This lounge is for real clients. 8 words. That's all it took to turn a silent morning in Miami into a battlefield of bias. Lisa Newman, the branch manager at Summit Wealth Bank, didn't blink. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't whisper. She projected confident, smug, certain. Vanessa Clark didn't flinch. She sat still, poised in the private client lounge she had every right to be in. But to Lisa, Vanessa's dark-washed jeans and pale blue cashmere sweater didn't scream billionaire CEO. They screamed imposter. What Lisa didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was that Vanessa Clark wasn't just a client. She owned the bank. And in just 10 minutes, every person in that room, every smirk, every insult, every sweetheart would face. A truth they were never trained for: power doesn't always come wearing a badge or a brand. Sometimes it walks in quietly and changes everything. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Vanessa Clark sat in the corner of the Summit Wealth Bank's private client lounge like any other patron, quiet, polite, and invisible to those who chose not to look deeper. The polished marble gleamed beneath her loafers, and the soft whir of the espresso machine hummed behind her. But the atmosphere wasn't serene. It was simmering. Lisa Newman's heels clicked like punctuation marks as she stalked toward Vanessa's table. Her eyes scanned Vanessa up and down, not out of recognition, but out of disbelief. No designer handbag. No watch worth a car. Just a woman in denim and cashmere asking to access her own funds. "We'll need proof of where your funds came from," Lisa said flatly, as if Vanessa had wandered in off the street to commit fraud in broad daylight. Vanessa didn't blink. She calmly opened her tablet, pulled up documentation, and offered it across the desk. Lisa didn't reach for it. She didn't even look. Instead, a man's voice sliced through the air. "Don't clog up the line, sweetheart." Edward Pierce, a private client with more arrogance than class, sneered as he walked past. With a careless flick of his wrist, he knocked Vanessa's tablet off the desk. The thud echoed soft but undeniable. An insult in motion. Still, Vanessa didn't react. She picked up the tablet slowly, her expression unreadable. Natalie Wells, standing nearby with arms crossed, offered a dagger of her own. "That amount of cash doesn't add up. You could have stolen it." Her tone was quiet, but the room heard it. And worse, the room watched. 2 older clients glanced up. One narrowed his eyes. Another leaned in and whispered to his wife. The story was already writing itself: a woman out of place, a transaction too large, clothes too casual. Suspicion followed her like a second shadow. Vanessa finally spoke. "Run my name." Lisa shook her head dismissively. "You're not verified. This isn't a walk-in center." A man in the back corner, Keith Morris, silently lifted his phone. The red light blinked on recording. But before he could capture another second, Vanessa raised a hand. "Don't," she said. Voice low but firm. "We settle this with facts, not footage." Calvin Holt. A sharply dressed black executive seated across the room stood up and crossed the lounge toward Keith. "Brother," he said gently, "put that down. This is bigger than a viral clip." Keith hesitated. Vanessa met his gaze and repeated, "Words. Use your words." The room stilled. Something had shifted. Then Maya Reed Young, nervous, clutching her purse, murmured, "This is foul." Vanessa turned. "Speak up," she encouraged. Maya stood. "She's not the problem. You are." She pointed directly at Lisa and Natalie. Natalie narrowed her eyes, unimpressed. "Security's on standby." Edward, now lounging by the espresso bar, chuckled. "You all really think this woman has $500,000 sitting in an account here?" He pulled a crumpled note from his pocket and tossed it across the marble floor. It skidded to a stop at Vanessa's feet. Maya picked it up and read aloud. Go to a pawn shop. Gasps rippled through the room. A white woman clutched her pearls. A young Latino father looked up from his phone, brows furrowed. The energy had turned electric. Charged. Divided. That's enough, Vanessa said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. She turned to Lisa. You're destroying this institution with every word. Lisa smirked. You're not a client. You're a con artist. Go play rich somewhere else. Vanessa took out her phone. Her fingers were steady. Carla, she said, start Protocol 6. Across the city, in a quiet office tower, Carla Evans, Vanessa's executive assistant, answered without missing a beat. It's ready, ma'am. Lisa rolled her eyes. Delusions don't scare me. In the corner, Keith raised his phone again, but Calvin stopped him once more. We talk, not post. Lisa leaned back, arms folded. Call security. Natalie nodded and reached for the phone. You're a fraud, she said as she dialed. You don't belong here. The words weren't loud, but they struck like hammers. Vanessa sat still. The same stillness she'd held at 23 when a loan officer had laughed in her face. The same calm that carried her through 14 corporate acquisitions and a global recession. And now the same poise that held the room in suspense. You called security, she said finally, because I exist. Even Calvin faltered for a moment, stunned by the precision of her words. The climax came not with shouting, but with a sentence that sliced cleaner than any insult. You just called the police, on the owner of the bank. Lisa Newman scoffed. The owner? She repeated with a dry laugh. Lady, if you owned this place, we'd know. Vanessa didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence was her shield, and truth-patient precise was her weapon. Natalie Wells, still holding the phone, covered the mouthpiece and whispered to Lisa. Should we verify the name? Lisa shook her head. She's bluffing. I've worked here 9 years. If someone like her owned this branch, I'd know it. But the room wasn't convinced. Clients whispered. Some began opening their own banking apps. One man, a retired professor named Gerald Lane, turned his phone screen toward his wife and mouthed, Clark. Vanessa Clark. Look her up. Meanwhile, Edward Pierce paced near the window, gesturing like a man staging a play. She's dressed like a teacher, not a CEO. Look at her shoes. Vanessa ignored it all. Her fingers moved again on the screen. Calm, calculated. Carla's voice returned in her ear. Ma'am, Summit compliance systems are unlocked. I've initiated Phase 2. Are you online with the board? Vanessa asked. Yes. All regional board members are observing silently via audio feed. Also, legal is connected. Vanessa gave a subtle nod as if she were checking off a box on a very old list. Just then, a chime rang through the lounge. A notification. One of the large wall-mounted client tablets, a device for browsing market news, flashed blue. Summit Enterprises Internal Memo Protocol. 6 activated. Miami Branch. Client Lounge. Lisa blinked. What the hell is that? Robert Clean, the assistant manager, stepped forward slowly. Protocol 6. That's an internal audit trigger, but only board-level executives can activate it. Natalie turned pale. There's no way she has that access. Vanessa remained still. You didn't ask who I was. You just decided who I wasn't. Calvin Holt now stepped closer, curiosity overtaking caution. I've heard of Protocol 6. It's only been used twice. Once during a fraud investigation in D.C., and once when the entire Chicago branch was suspended. You're saying... She's not saying anything. Lisa cut in, voice tight. She's manipulating the system. We need to shut that screen off. Too late. The tablet flashed again. A line of text appeared. Summit Wealth Bank CEO verified. Vanessa M. Clark. Executive override granted. A stunned hush fell like a dropped curtain. Even Edward stopped pacing. Maya gasped audibly. "No way!" Robert's voice cracked as he read the screen again. "CEO, override." Natalie's jaw slackened. She's not bluffing. Vanessa finally stood up. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. She simply rose with the grace of someone who had waited for this moment, not for revenge, but for clarity. "I gave this team a year," she said softly but firmly. 12 months of internal monitoring, 8 unresolved complaints, 3 compliance flags buried by local admin staff. Her gaze landed squarely on Natalie. "You buried 2 of them personally." Natalie stepped back. "I was following policy, no." Vanessa interrupted. "You were following bias, dressed as procedure." Then she turned to Robert. "You signed off on 1 complaint without even investigating." Robert lowered his head. Lisa stepped forward, defensive. "That's not possible. Those reports were filtered. That's not a CEO's job to see." "I wrote the policy you're quoting," Vanessa replied. "And I rewrote the rules after acquiring this bank." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The room was silent, except for one sound, the alert tone on Calvin Holt's phone. He looked down, tapped once, and then slowly turned the screen for everyone nearby to see. It was a live article. Vanessa Clark, CEO of Summit Enterprises, confirms expansion into banking sector with acquisition of Summit Wealth Bank. September 2023. Her photo accompanied it. Same eyes, same posture, different outfit. Maya's knees buckled slightly. She whispered, "You own all of this?" Vanessa nodded once. 81%. I kept my name off the daily directories to see what kind of institution I'd inherited. Then she turned to the center of the lounge. "And today, you've shown me exactly that." The unexpected climax came from the corner. Zara Brooks, quiet, nearly invisible behind a frosted divider, stood slowly. "They did it to me, too," she said, voice shaking. 2 weeks ago. I came to open a business account for my photography studio. Natalie told me freelancers don't qualify." Natalie paled. "That's not." Zara raised her phone. "I didn't post this, but I recorded it, just in case someone like her walked in one day." She hit play. Natalie's voice blared across the room. "We don't open accounts for people with inconsistent income. Try one of the budget branches." The room gasped again. Even Tyler Moss, the security lead, stepped back. Vanessa turned slowly. "You didn't just humiliate me," she said. "You revealed yourselves. And now the mirror's up for everyone to see." You could hear the air shift. The hush that followed Zara's recording wasn't quiet. It was dense. Thick with the realization that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about policy or procedure. This was about rot. Not on the surface, but embedded deep in the walls of Summit Wealth Bank. Natalie Wells still stood frozen near the front desk, her arms slack at her sides. Her mouth opened, then closed. No defense came. Zara pressed stop on her phone, then tucked it back into her denim jacket. "I thought maybe I imagined it," she said. "That maybe I was being sensitive." But watching her, she pointed at Vanessa. "Go through the same thing." That made me realize it wasn't just me. It's the system. Vanessa nodded slowly. "You're right. And it's time everyone else saw it too." At that moment, Carla Evans's voice crackled through Vanessa's tablet, loud enough for the entire lounge to hear. "Ma'am, compliance teams have confirmed 8 prior complaints labeled as unverifiable, all filed by women of color. 4 were closed without internal review. 3 were tagged by Natalie. 1 by Lisa." gasps circled the room like wind through trees. Lisa scoffed. "We get dozens of complaints." "You can't call all of them valid," Carla replied without missing a beat. "When everyone dismissed comes from the same demographic, that's not randomness. That's targeting." Robert finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. "We followed protocol." Vanessa turned toward him. "Whose protocol?" He paused, because he knew. The truth wasn't hidden in fine print or a single act. It lived in how they moved, how they judged, how they smirked when they thought no one was watching. It was structural. "You didn't need to say the words race or class," Vanessa continued. "You created a climate where those things decided everything, from who got seen to who got silenced." Edward Pierce snorted. "This is getting ridiculous." "A climate?" "It's a bank. We have metrics, not feelings." Vanessa didn't look at him. She turned to the wall-mounted screen and tapped her tablet once. A presentation popped up, a slide titled Service Deviation Audit, Internal Draft. Data columns filled the screen. Verified withdrawals over $250K, O white clients, 98% success rate, O black clients, 62%, flagged for verification. Account freezes within 72 hours of opening, a Latino clients, Sodrus 1%, O white clients, 6%. Complaint resolution escalations, O women of color, 4%, O white male clients, 91%. The room went silent again. Not because of shock this time, but because the numbers spoke. Maya, standing just a foot behind Vanessa, muttered, "I've never seen it laid out like that. I've felt it, but seeing it—" "It's systemic," Vanessa said. "Built into the bones. Polished like marble, dressed in professionalism, hidden behind terms like risk profile and transaction suitability." Tyler Moss. The security lead shifted uncomfortably. "That's not what I was trained." "No," Vanessa replied, "but it is what you learned." Suddenly, Keith Morris stepped forward. He was still holding his phone, but now it dangled by his side. "Why now?" he asked. "Why not reveal who you were when you walked in?" Vanessa looked at him. "Because power doesn't change people. It reveals them." Today was a test. And not just for Lisa or Natalie or Edward, for the system, and for everyone watching. Then came the unexpected blow. Carla's voice again. "Vanessa, we've identified a hidden tag in the CRM system created 3 years ago. A client flag called Level 4 Watch List. It was used to categorize clients by perceived compliance risk. The list includes 117 names. 92% are Black or Hispanic. Lisa's credentials created the tag. Natalie used it the most. Lisa finally snapped. "I was doing my job," she shouted. "You don't know what it's like dealing with fraud. We have to protect the bank." "Protect it from who?" Vanessa said calmly. "From your own clients," Lisa's lip curled. "From people who don't belong." The room recoiled. There it was. The mask torn away. The rot exposed. "You don't belong here." The same phrase, spoken 20 minutes earlier, now echoed like a confession. Vanessa took a step forward. "I built a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing. I acquired this bank not to flex status, but to test if institutions can change. What I found wasn't resistance to bias, it was loyalty to it." Calvin Holt nodded slowly. "You didn't just find it, you proved it." At that moment, Maya's voice cracked through the stillness. "So what now?" And then, like lightning, the climax landed. Vanessa turned back to the screen. She tapped again. Live audit. Commencing compliance board, observing but. Right now, she said, you are being watched, not by a camera, but by the people who decide who stays and who goes. Lisa backed towards the wall. Natalie turned white. Edward Pierce's voice broke. "This is a setup." "No," Vanessa said. "This is your system, finally seeing itself. The weight of silence was crushing. The marble walls of the Summit Wealth Bank Client Lounge, designed to reflect wealth confidence and permanence, now mirrored something else entirely: shame. Lisa Newman leaned back against a frosted divider, arms crossed like a child caught cheating on a test. Natalie Wells sat frozen in a chair she had once occupied like a throne. Edward Pierce had stopped pacing. Even his bravado knew it had run out of oxygen. But amidst that silence, voices began to stir. Not loud at first, not bold, but present. Zara Brooks shifted in her seat, blinking slowly as she looked around the room. Her voice, though hesitant, broke the stillness. All of this, just to prove we don't belong. Why Vanessa Clark didn't answer. She didn't have to, because someone else did. "I don't know," Robert Clean said, stepping forward. The assistant manager's face was pale, and his voice faltered. I didn't see it at first. Or maybe I didn't want to." He looked directly at Vanessa now. "But I should have. I signed off on things I didn't read, ignored complaints I didn't want to handle. When Natalie told me to approve the filters, I didn't ask questions. I just clicked." A breath rippled through the lounge. Some clients sat forward. Others exchanged glances. Robert wasn't a villain. He was the witness. And now he was waking up. "I thought I was doing my job," he continued, "following protocol. But the protocol was written to fail people like you, wasn't it?" Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "No, it was rewritten to protect them. You just didn't change the practice." Robert swallowed hard. "I see that now." And he wasn't alone. Keith Morris finally raised his voice. "When I walked in here, I thought I was going to see a confrontation, maybe something viral. But what I'm seeing now, it's different." He looked at Vanessa. "I'm seeing control, restraint, and facts. And I realize I wouldn't have believed you if you had shouted. If you had stormed out, angry people would have said you were emotional, unstable. Instead, you sat still and watched the room indict itself." Vanessa nodded. "That's why silence can be louder than rage." Then, to everyone's surprise, Calvin Holt, who had remained calm through everything, stepped forward. "I've banked here for 7 years," he said. 7 years of being over-verified, underserved, and told I qualified, only after someone rechecked my income twice." He paused. "I never said anything. I thought that's just how things were. But today, watching you stand here, watching that screen show what we've all felt, I realize I was wrong to be silent." Vanessa turned to him. "You weren't wrong. You were surviving. But now we lead." The words weren't just for Calvin. They were for everyone watching. A woman in her 60s, white-haired, stood slowly near the back of the lounge. "I thought she was a customer causing trouble," she admitted softly. "But I watched every step, and I never thought once to question why she was treated so badly." Vanessa looked to her. "Thank you for saying that." The woman nodded. "It's about time someone did." Then came the unexpected twist. One of the tellers from the outer floor, a young Hispanic man in his 20s, opened the glass door to the lounge. He looked around, hesitated, then stepped in. "My name's Miguel," he said. "I'm just a junior staffer, but I've seen the reports. I saw Natalie reject Zara's file. I was told not to get involved." I didn't say anything. He turned toward Vanessa. "But I want to testify. I want to be part of cleaning this up." Lisa scoffed from the side. "Now everyone wants to be a hero." Miguel turned to her. "No, we just don't want to be accomplices anymore." The words hit harder than any accusation. Vanessa smiled faintly. "Courage doesn't mean you were never silent. It means you spoke up before it was too late." And then the climax arrived unannounced. The wall tablet lit up again. Incoming compliance statement. Regional Ethics Board connected. Carla's voice followed seconds later. Vanessa, the Regional Ethics Board, has confirmed Robert's admission. They've marked his actions as cooperation under duress, but Lisa and Natalie's conduct is flagged for malicious suppression. Lisa pushed off the wall. What is this A-show trial? No. Carla replied flatly through the speaker. It's accountability. Suddenly, the door opened again. Two sharply dressed Summit compliance officers entered. One woman, one man, badges around their necks, clipboards in hand. They didn't greet anyone. They simply moved toward Vanessa. The woman spoke first. We're here to document employee testimonies and launch the disciplinary review. Please proceed as you see fit, ma'am. Vanessa didn't move at first. She looked around the room at the faces of people waking up one by one. I will, she said. Then she turned to the lounge. Today won't be remembered because I'm the CEO. It'll be remembered because people who were silent finally decided to speak. Vanessa Clark stood at the center of the private lounge, no longer an invisible client, no longer the subject of suspicion, now the conductor of a reckoning. The two Summit compliance officers stood quietly by the side table. The man tapped on a secure tablet while the woman scanned the room with the calm focus of someone trained to document damage. Proceed, ma'am, she said again. Vanessa didn't rush. She reached into her tablet case, pulled out a slim carbon black drive, and handed it to the male officer. These are internal chat logs, flagged interactions, and time-stamped access records from the past 12 months. They cover every employee present. Edward Pierce scoffed from his seat, arms crossed. This is absurd. I'm a client. I'm not part of your HR witch hunt. Vanessa didn't look at him. You're more than part of it. You're Exhibit C. Clients murmured at the implication. Edward flushed. On what grounds? Vanessa turned. On the grounds that you've had 3 verified complaints from female staff across 3 branches, and they were all buried under the heading Client Reputation Protection. Carla's voice came through the tablet again, timely as ever. Confirmed. All 3 reports were filed and dismissed without follow-up. One of them was flagged by Lisa directly under confidential override. Lisa stiffened. The female compliance officer looked up. We'll need those overrides decrypted. Vanessa nodded. Already done. Check the audit folder labeled Glass Ceilings. It contains every conversation where client power was prioritized over staff safety. The officer raised her brow slightly. That name. Poetic. It was my reflection, Vanessa said, of what this place valued. And that's when Natalie Wells made her final miscalculation. You hacked our system, she demanded, voice shrill. Vanessa turned slowly. No, I owned it. Big difference. A low chuckle rolled through the room. Calvin Holt smiled grimly. They still don't get it. Robert Klein cleared his throat, guilt still clinging to his posture. I gave her the wrong access pass once thinking it was for a presentation upload. She could have seen anything. She didn't need your password, Carla added over speaker. She wrote the infrastructure. Now Natalie was visibly shaking. This is insane. This is not how internal reviews are done. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. You're right. Usually they're done in silence, in shadows. But this time, it's public. The young teller, Miguel, stepped forward again. I can corroborate one of those conversations. I saw Lisa and Natalie override 2 verification flags just to deny access to an elderly black man in February. His name was Mr. Tompkins. Carla responded instantly. Got it. I just pulled the Feb 3rd incident log. It shows client flagged for ID inconsistency, despite having 2 forms of government-issued ID and 3-factor account confirmation. Dispute status closed. the male compliance officer added, and he later filed a complaint through third-party arbitration. It was never reported internally. Vanessa looked around the room. This is why we gather the evidence before we react. The facts don't yell. They just wait. Then came the unexpected twist. The wall screen lit up again, unauthorized. Everyone turned. A grainy time-stamped security video began to play. Vanessa didn't touch a thing. In the clip dated April 16th, Lisa was speaking privately with Natalie. The audio was faint, but clear enough. Lisa: if they look like they're going to be trouble, we flag 'em early. We can't afford activist types clogging our queue. Natalie: under what code? Lisa: use the low verification match tag. It auto-triggers a freeze. Gasps broke the room. Zara Brooks covered her mouth. Maya Reed blinked rapidly. Keith whispered, "They were tagging us for being inconvenient." Vanessa tapped her tablet once. That video came from a backup hardline security footage that isn't on the main feed. It was installed as part of our 2023 acquisition protocol. Redundant surveillance, just in case. Lisa looked panicked now. That's out of context. You're out of integrity, Vanessa replied. And context doesn't change your tone. The female compliance officer looked at the clip again, then nodded. This is more than negligence. This is intent. And then Calvin Holt stepped forward, holding his own phone. I saved all my transaction records, every single one flagged for manual ID recheck over the past 2 years. He pulled up the log and mirrored it to the screen. Dozens of instances, all flagged between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. Monday morning's Lisa's shift. I thought it was coincidence. I thought maybe I was overreacting. But now, Vanessa looked at him gently. Now you know it wasn't you. It was them. Clients around the room nodded. One elderly man stood. I believe him. They flagged my daughter the same way, said her signature was too different. We had to come back 3 times. Vanessa turned to the compliance team. Add it to the file. The male officer nodded. Already uploading. This branch isn't just broken, it's infected. Then Carla's voice. Again, Vanessa. I've traced a direct internal message from Natalie to Tyler Moss sent 3 months ago. She wrote, "Flag any high-volume walk-ins under caution if they look like they're here to cause noise." Maya Reed erupted. You profiled us before we even opened our mouths. Tyler, standing off to the side, didn't argue. He just looked at the floor. Vanessa exhaled slowly. No more secrets. She looked at the room. This isn't about punishment. This is about removal of rot, of fear, of silence. And then the final climax hit. The female compliance officer pulled a file from her tablet and turned to Vanessa. We now grant you full authority to initiate Phase 3 immediate restructuring of this branch, including terminations. Vanessa nodded once. Then let's begin. The air had changed. The once sterile marble-glossed lounge of Summit Wealth Bank now felt like a war room. The carpet muffled footsteps, but every move mattered. Vanessa Clark stood tall, calm, calculating, not out for vengeance, but prepared for justice. Phase 3. Authorization confirmed, the female compliance officer said, tapping her tablet. We'll shadow your lead. Vanessa nodded, but didn't act immediately. Strategy first, emotion later. She turned to the remaining employees. I'm not here to cause chaos. I'm here to establish clarity. Every action from this point forward will be precise, legal, and documented. Lisa Newman crossed her arms. You can't just fire people in public. I didn't intend to, Vanessa replied. But you chose to violate trust in public. The remedy will meet the exposure. Carla's voice returned over the speaker. All badge access logs from the last 24 months have been pulled. Lisa, Natalie, Robert, and Tyler have dozens of overlap instances, especially during flagged account closures. Files are being shared now. Miguel, the junior teller, stepped closer. Ma'am, there's more. Vanessa gave him space. I saw Lisa bring in a client last month, a man with no ID and no account. She walked him straight into a vault consultation room. He withdrew $100,000 in cashier's checks. When I asked about it, she told me to mind my pay grade. Vanessa didn't blink. Was the transaction logged? No. I checked the record. It was scrubbed. Carla confirming now. Yes, that check serial doesn't exist in the internal audit trail. That's fraud, Lisa. Lisa's eyes widened. You don't have proof, Vanessa turned to the compliance officers. Add financial misappropriation to her file, Natalie snapped. You're just throwing dirt now. No, Vanessa said coolly. I'm pulling weeds. Then she pivoted to Robert. I reviewed your digital footprint. You approved 36 overrides without managerial sign-off, all within a 5-week window. That's not laziness. That's design. Robert looked down, silent. We'll determine consequences, the male officer said, but your access is frozen pending internal testimony. Then came the first strategic move. Vanessa pulled a slim leather folder from her tablet case and handed it to Calvin Holt. Inside copies of client complaints buried redacted and ignored, each one labeled by hand. You're an entrepreneur. You lead people. You know systems, Vanessa said. I want you to sit on the Transitional Ethics Board, not because you're a client, but because you've been a target. Calvin froze. Me, I'm not a banker. Exactly, Vanessa replied. You're not infected. He nodded slowly, gripping the folder with new weight. The room stirred. Vanessa then turned to Zara Brooks. And you. You said you wanted to open a business account. That offer still stands. Except now, you'll be the face of our client equity program. Zara blinked, stunned. Me. You endured bias, but you never walked away. That makes you stronger than half the staff here. Tears welled. Yes, I want to help. The move was strategic, but not performative. Vanessa wasn't handing out pity, she was reconstructing the system with voices that had once been denied entry. Maya Reed stepped forward. Where do I stand? Vanessa smiled. You spoke truth when silence was easier. You'll be my liaison to our community outreach team. They've never had a client survivor on the inside. Until now. Maya exhaled, overwhelmed. I won't let you down. You already didn't. Then another twist. Keith Morris raised his hand. I'm a media consultant. Independent. I've got no stake in this place, but I do have footage of every moment up until you asked us to stop recording. Everyone turned to him. You said use words. I did. But now, this story deserves to be told. Vanessa looked at him cautiously. You want to release it. I want to help shape it, Keith replied. With your voice at the center. Not mine. Not a caption. You tell the story. I'll help you make sure it's heard right. A long pause. Then Vanessa nodded once. We'll talk. Later. Keith nodded respectful. Lisa scoffed from her seat. Look at this. Appointing clients like royalty. Turning this into a circus. No, Vanessa said. I'm turning this into a reckoning. Then came the sharpest move yet. Vanessa turned to the compliance officers. Before we move to formal termination, I want to freeze this branch. A beat passed. You mean pause operations? The male officer asked. No, I mean lock down all outgoing transactions. No withdrawals. No internal fund movements. I want a digital quarantine. If any employee was using this system for fraud, we stop the bleed now. Carla's voice. Executing lockout. 10 minutes. Lisa's voice cracked. You're killing this branch. No, Vanessa replied. I'm giving it surgery. And then the climax. Vanessa looked at the screen and pressed a single button. The screen changed to a short, simple statement. Summit Wealth Bank Miami branch under CEO-led restructure. Full audit in progress. Clients in the room began to clap. Not for performance, but for relief. For once, someone didn't just promise change. She executed it quietly, strategically, and in real time. You've made your point, Lisa Newman snapped. You've embarrassed us, dragged our names through the marble, and turned clients into critics. What more do you want? Vanessa Clark didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She turned toward Lisa with the stillness of someone holding more than a title. She held truth. And that truth was ready to walk into the light. I want accountability, Vanessa said. And I want it in your own words. The room stiffened. You mean you want me to confess? Lisa spat eyes darting between the compliance officers and the clients still lingering in quiet disbelief. No, Vanessa replied. I want you to confront the system you helped build before I dismantle it entirely. Lisa's smirk faltered. Calvin Holt stepped beside Vanessa. Tell the truth, Lisa. For once, you said earlier that people don't belong. Tell us what you meant. Tell everyone. Lisa laughed bitterly. Why, so you can all cheer when I break? No, Vanessa said, so you can hear yourself out loud for the first time. A long beat passed. Then Lisa's voice cracked through the quiet. I was trained to profile, not officially, not with checklists or policies, but with looks, with assumptions. I didn't create that, I inherited it. Natalie shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. Lisa glanced at her. We all knew what Level 4 meant. It wasn't about fraud. It was about fit. Who fit the image? Who looked like money? Zara's face twisted with disbelief. So I didn't fit. You didn't wear the right shoes? You didn't talk the right talk, Lisa snapped. That's what we were told. Unofficially. Repeatedly. And yes, I enforced it. Because I thought I had to. Keith whispered, She's admitting it. Lisa continued her posture rigid with defiance. When Vanessa walked in, I didn't see a CEO. I saw another problem. And I dealt with it like I always did. Vanessa asked, And if I hadn't stopped you, Lisa looked away. You would have called the police, labeled me a threat. Had me dragged out. Vanessa answered for her, because that's what you're used to doing when power doesn't look how you expect. The room held its breath. Then Maya Reed, standing in the corner, stepped forward. That's why I spoke up. Because if I didn't, she'd be gone, and you'd still be ruling this place with silence. The male compliance officer cleared his throat. Everything said here is logged. Lisa's statement will be submitted as part of the disciplinary record. Lisa's eyes narrowed. So that's it. You strip everything I've worked for because I said what I was trained to see. No, Vanessa said. Because you knew it was wrong. And did it anyway. Then Vanessa turned to Natalie. You've been silent, but not absent. You approved false overrides, triggered unnecessary police calls, and dismissed complaints from women who looked just like Zara and Maya. Natalie stood abruptly, anger rising. I was under pressure. I didn't make the system, I was trying to survive in it. You survived by burying others, Vanessa replied, unwavering. And now the cost of your comfort is here. Natalie shook her head. I never signed up for this, but you signed every denial form. You signed every override. Calvin interjected. You signed your name while pretending you weren't complicit. Then an unexpected blow. Zara pulled out her phone again. I didn't post the first recording, she said, but I'm posting this one. She hit record, pointed it at herself, then slowly turned the camera around the room. She didn't say much, just enough. This is Summit Wealth Bank. This is the CEO they tried to throw out. This is what bias looks like when it thinks no one's watching. But today, we are. Lisa's eyes widened. You can't do that. This is private property. It's public truth. Zara said, calm but sharp. And if this is how you treated me, Vanessa and others, then the world deserves to know. Vanessa nodded slowly. Let her post it, she said. The world should see what happens when people in power are finally held accountable. Suddenly, Tyler Moss, the security lead, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet, stepped forward. I need to say something, he said. Vanessa's gaze hardened. You detained me. You laid hands on me. I know, Tyler said, but I was part of it too. I flagged clients before they ever reached the front desk. Natalie sent the tags. Lisa approved. I enforced. Keith shook his head. So you were the muscle. Great. Tyler looked down. But I didn't know who you were. If I had Vanessa raised a hand, that's the problem. You shouldn't have needed to. Another moment of truth. Another layer peeled back. Then Carla's voice returned. Vanessa Corporate just confirmed your authority to proceed with summary terminations. HR has finalized documentation. Would you like to initiate now? The final confrontation was ready. Vanessa looked at the compliance officers. Yes, let's begin. But do it where it started, right here. The female officer stepped forward, holding a folder. Lisa Newman, Natalie Wells, Tyler Moss, Robert Klain. Your employment with Summit Wealth Bank is terminated effective immediately. Lisa gasped. Natalie stumbled backward. Tyler didn't move. Robert exhaled, relieved. Then Vanessa delivered the final strike. You weren't terminated because you were bad employees. You were terminated because you became good at a broken system. And with that, the confrontation ended. But the fallout had just begun. The words "you're terminated" didn't echo, they detonated. Lisa Newman stood paralyzed. Her jaw worked, but no sound came out. Just minutes earlier, she had controlled the room with a smirk and a nod. Now, stripped of title and power, she looked around for someone to save her and found no one. Natalie Wells sat frozen disbelief, breaking into panic. She had spent years building a shell of impunity around herself. HR protection, managerial leverage, internal favors. But none of it held now. Robert Klain dropped into a seat like his knees had failed, not out of defiance, out of surrender. His eyes were distant, like a man watching his own career dissolve in real time. Tyler Moss remained upright, but something in his stance shifted. No longer the stone-faced enforcer. He looked lighter, weaker, broken from the inside out. But it wasn't over. Vanessa Clark wasn't done yet. She stepped toward the center of the room and tapped her tablet. A second screen mounted high on the opposite wall lit up. This one displayed a live feed from Summit's corporate headquarters. On screen was the Chief Operating Officer of Summit Enterprises, Elena Tran. Her voice came through with perfect clarity. This is Elena Tran. Corporate has reviewed all incident files. Effective immediately, Summit Wealth Bank's Miami branch is placed under executive receivership. All decisions are transferred to CEO Vanessa Clark for the next 72 hours. Regional leadership is suspended pending audit. The lounge reacted like it had been punched. Suspended, Lisa croaked. You're freezing the entire region. Elena didn't blink. We've identified parallel complaints from Fort Lauderdale, Tampa, and Orlando, all following the same patterns. Miami was the test case. It failed. Vanessa looked at Lisa one final time. You weren't just bad for this branch. You were a contagion. And today, that contagion stops here. Calvin Holt whispered. She's leveling the whole house. Keith Morris adjusted his glasses. No, she's fumigating it. Zara, still holding her phone, whispered into her live stream, "This is history. We're watching a bank collapse not from money, but from the weight of its own prejudice." Then came the collapse in real time. Clients began standing not to leave, but to speak. "I came in last month to move my retirement fund," said an elderly black man named Mr. Tompkins, walking forward slowly. "Lisa told me I needed in-person review, but the white man behind me withdrew $300K on a call. A young Latina woman followed him. They denied my student loan because my address was in a high-risk neighborhood. I have a 780 credit score." A single mother added, "I waited 3 weeks for approval they said would take 3 days. Then I saw my white coworker approved in 24 hours. Same application. It snowballed." One voice turned to 5 to 15. People who had once sat quietly sipping espresso or scrolling phones now stood in a chorus of truth. Years of marginalization, hidden behind polite service and stone walls, spilled forward like floodwater bursting a dam. Maya Reed turned toward the wall of framed portraits, branch managers' board chairs, honored donors. All of them white. All of them smiling. "I used to think this room hated noise," she said. "Turns out it feared it." Vanessa turned to the compliance team. "Please log all client testimonials and forward them to the audit committee." "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied, typing rapidly. "This is now an open class-based review." Then came the most unexpected voice. Richard Langford, the elderly white gentleman who had sat silently in the corner, stood up. He wore a Summit Wealth Legacy pin on his lapel. "I trained Lisa," he said. The room stilled. "I trained Robert. I helped design the onboarding program 20 years ago. I used words like professionalism and presentation. But what I meant, whether I admitted it or not, was whiteness. You could hear people inhale. I never said it aloud, but I saw who got promoted and who got paused, who got flagged and who got filtered through, and I let it happen." Vanessa approached him. "Why speak now?" Richard's voice cracked. "Because you said something earlier. That power doesn't change people, it reveals them. And I realized silence revealed me too." He turned toward the compliance team. "I'd like to submit a formal statement and request that my own training materials be pulled. They need to be reviewed for coded language." Vanessa nodded. "Thank you." Then came the public unraveling. Carla's voice rang through again. "Vanessa Summit Corporate has received 43 support messages through internal channels just in the last hour. Employees at other branches are stepping forward, some offering to testify, some sending documentation. Copy them to the ethics board," Vanessa instructed. "Yes, ma'am? Also, media outlets have started calling. Word is spreading." Keith grinned faintly. "They're going to want a statement." Vanessa's voice stayed measured. "They'll get one. But not yet. First, I talked to the people who were hurt, not the ones who just started watching. And then, the ultimate collapse." Elena Tran's face reappeared on screen. "Vanessa Summit Enterprises Board has voted. The entire Eastern Florida Regional Executive Team has been placed under review. You are now authorized to begin Phase 4 structural reform." The marble tower had cracked, and it was falling fast. The walls didn't look different. The marble still gleamed. The recessed lights still glowed evenly across the private client lounge. But something fundamental had changed, not in the architecture, but in the atmosphere. What once cloaked prejudice in professionalism now held the weight of revelation. Vanessa Clark stood near the center table where this entire confrontation began. Only now the table was surrounded not by suspicion, but by transparency. Compliance officers continued logging testimonies. Clients moved through the space with new posture, more upright, more visible, and the faces of leadership, the old guard, were gone. Lisa, Natalie, Tyler, Robert, Edward, all removed. Their names were no longer being whispered or feared. They were being archived. Vanessa turned toward the nearest staff member, a young woman in a Summit Wealth uniform. Her name badge reading Anya. She had said nothing until now. Her eyes had been watchful but guarded. "You've been quiet," Vanessa said gently. "May I ask what you're thinking?" Anya swallowed. I don't know. I've only worked here 6 months. I was told not to speak unless asked, told to observe and defer. I thought it was just how banks worked." Vanessa smiled softly. "That's how silence works. It teaches you obedience and sells it as professionalism." Anya's eyes filled slightly. "But you just stood here and changed everything." "No," Vanessa replied. "I revealed what was already broken. Now we get to rebuild." Calvin Holt stood nearby, flipping through the formal complaint summaries. There's enough here to reprogram half the system. "But where do we start?" "With words," Vanessa answered. "With the terms that shield bias. With the protocols that reward dehumanization." She turned toward the compliance officers. "Effective immediately, I want all Summit Wealth branches to suspend the following classifications: visual risk, high walk-in volatility, and profile flagging based on attire." The male officer nodded. "We'll document the directive and notify all regional leads." Maya Reed raised her hand. "Can we replace them?" "With something that centers humanity, not suspicion." Vanessa looked to her. "What would you call them?" Maya hesitated, then said, "Client dignity score. Track how many clients leave feeling heard. Measure conversations, not just conversions." Vanessa turned to Carla, still connected via speaker. "Can we code that?" "Already drafting it," Carla replied. "We can prototype a D-score system within a week." Keith Morris chuckled. D-score. For dignity. That might be the first metric that ever made sense. Then Zara Brooks' camera, now off, but confidence in her voice, spoke up. "Can we add something else? A new employee onboarding video. Not with actors. With survivors. With clients who were mistreated." Vanessa smiled. "You're thinking like a builder." "No," Zara said. "I'm thinking like someone who doesn't want to go through this again." There was a pause. Then Richard Langford, the retired trainer, stepped forward again. "I'd like to help rewrite the training manuals. I helped build the first ones. I want to fix what I broke." Vanessa nodded once. "Then let's start fresh." The male compliance officer cleared his throat. "Vanessa, I have a question, if I may." "Of course." He hesitated. "Why didn't you just fire them and walk out? Why go through all this? Why not keep your identity quiet issue memos and restructure behind closed doors?" Vanessa turned slowly. Because policy built in silence can't destroy what silence protected. She stepped toward the room. This wasn't just about a bank. This was about trust. And trust doesn't return through announcements. It returns through transparency. A quiet beat passed. Then she added, "And because I didn't just want to fire people, I wanted to wake them." Zara whispered, "And us." Vanessa nodded, "And you." Then came the rebirth. Not in words, but in action. Clients began moving, not to leave, but to help. An elderly woman offered to volunteer for the Community Review Board. A young man from the IT department approached with an idea for anonymous complaint triggers. Miguel the teller asked to be trained in the new dignity system, and Anya, once silent, now resolute, volunteered to be the first to test the new onboarding protocol. "If I'm staying," she said, "I want to know I'm part of something clean." Vanessa turned to Carla. "Assign internal team leads. Community Input Ethics Compliance Visual Bias Response, Carla replied. On it. New chain of command will be reflected in under 24 hours. Keith looked around the lounge. This feels different. It is, Calvin said, because now we know what was wrong. And more importantly, we know who had the courage to fix it. Vanessa didn't smile. She stood still, absorbing the moment, not for pride, but for grounding. The rebirth wasn't about celebration. It was about responsibility. And for the first time, the walls of Summit Wealth Bank didn't echo power. They echoed possibility. By midday, the news had spread beyond the marble walls, inside the Summit Wealth Bank Miami branch. A transformation was underway, but outside on social media, in boardrooms, and across major news outlets, the story had already become headline material. Bank CEO mistaken for fraud suspect fires entire branch after being profiled. Vanessa Clark shuts down systemic racism in banking with one visit. Dignity over dollars. A CEO's stand goes viral, and it was only getting started. Inside the branch, Vanessa Clark reviewed a document freshly printed by the compliance team, a full restructuring chart. It showed red boxes where Lisa Natalie Tyler and Robert once sat. Each box had notes beside it. Terminated for cause. Internal bias violations. Fraud-related inquiry pending. More importantly, however, were the green boxes being filled. Calvin Holt, Community Ethics Liaison. Zara Brooks, Client Equity Ambassador. Maya Reed, Public Experience Consultant. Each appointment wasn't symbolic, it was strategic. These aren't just roles Vanessa explained to the remaining staff and compliance officers. They're safeguards. The male compliance officer nodded. We're integrating the new roles into official Summit policy templates. Other branches will follow. Then Carla's voice came through. Vanessa, 3 regional directors from Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, and Jacksonville have resigned. They cited philosophical differences with new oversight protocols. Vanessa didn't react. Accept all resignations. Flag their branches for expedited equity audits. Carla continued. Also, an investigative reporter just reached out. They've uncovered a 2019 lawsuit against Summit's Western Division. Settled quietly. Similar allegations of client profiling. Vanessa turned to Keith. What's the public reaction? He held up his phone. Your name's trending. There's already a dozen think pieces, but they're not painting you as angry or erratic. They're calling you poised, calculated, relentless. Zara chuckled. Because she is. Keith added. But more importantly, clients are responding. I've seen over 2,000 comments saying they're considering moving their assets to Summit now because of what happened today. Vanessa nodded slowly. Then we make sure this isn't a PR moment. It's a policy shift. She turned to the compliance team. I want a quarterly public bias report. Not internal. Public. The female officer raised an eyebrow. That's unprecedented. Good, Vanessa replied. That means we're doing something right. Then came the next structural quake. Carla returned on speaker. Vanessa, Edward Pierce has issued a cease and desist order. He claims he was publicly defamed during today's proceedings. A beat of silence. Then Vanessa said, Issue corporate's response. We stand by all internal findings and have documented his history of client misconduct. Inform him that Summit has terminated all account relations and barred entry from every affiliated institution nationwide. Calvin added, Let him sue. We'll counter with every woman he intimidated. Zara grinned, and every policy he benefited from. Then Vanessa said something no one expected. Send him a copy of the new onboarding training. Maya looked up. What if he's going to file lawsuits? He should know what we stand for, Vanessa said. Keith burst out laughing. You're not just cutting out rot, you're educating it on the way out. Suddenly, Anya, the young staffer, stepped forward, holding a printed form. I know I'm just a floor assistant, she said, but I reviewed the branch's old escalation handbook. It says, client agitation is grounds for denial of service. She handed it to Vanessa. That phrase was used to justify everything. We need to strike it. Vanessa looked at the phrase. Not only do we strike it, we reverse it. She grabbed a pen and wrote, client dignity is grounds for escalation to support, not denial. Then handed it back. Make this the new rule. Carla's voice chimed in again. Done. I've uploaded the policy reversal to the live framework. And just as Vanessa lowered her hand, another high-level alert came through. Subject SEC notice. Everyone froze. Carla read aloud. Vanessa, the Securities and Exchange Commission, has requested a meeting. They've heard about the regional resignations and client data flags. They want a full transparency briefing. Immediately. Zara whispered. The federal government just rang the doorbell. Vanessa nodded. Good. Let them in. The male compliance officer looked stunned. You're going to open the books, all of them, Vanessa said. Because we can't rebuild trust if we don't show our receipts. That was the difference between damage control and structural reform. One hid behind legalese. The other walked straight through the fire and took responsibility. Maya said quietly, You're not just changing the rules. You're changing the foundation. No, Vanessa replied. We're finally pouring the right one. The air in the private client lounge no longer trembled with fear, it pulsed with consequence. Power had shifted, and for the first time in the branch's history, it wasn't hiding behind mahogany desks, cold reception stares, or we reserve the right to refuse service signs. Now, power stood on new ground. Zara Brooks, once denied a business account for being a freelancer, sat at the table where Lisa once ruled reviewing the draft of Summit's first client equity framework. Should we add language that prevents any account from being flagged solely based on profession? She asked, looking to Vanessa. Yes, Vanessa answered, and require that any denial includes documented reasoning signed by at least 2 independent officers, one of whom must be client-facing. Calvin Holt nodded. Double accountability. Good. Meanwhile, Miguel the junior teller stood with a laptop in hand. I've started tagging old override approvals for manual audit. I flagged 16 from Natalie in the past 2 months alone, all directed at Black or Latino clients, 0 white clients with the same flag. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Attach that report to the Phase 4 summary. We'll use it to develop the first real anti-bias enforcement mechanism. Then came the reversal no one expected. Carla's voice crackled through the speaker. Vanessa Natalie Wells has just issued a public statement. The room paused. Carla read it aloud. To the clients of Summit Wealth Bank, I failed you. I buried complaints flagged clients for subjective reasons and enforced policies I knew were flawed. I did this to maintain my rank, my salary, and my illusion of control. I now realize that control was fear in disguise. I am sorry. Natalie Wells, former senior private banker. A heavy silence followed. Maya Reed crossed her arms. Too little too late. Zara tilted her head. Or maybe, too honest to ignore, Calvin added. She's trying to save her name. But maybe. It means she finally sees it. Vanessa didn't smile. She simply said, Let the apology stand. But the consequence remains. Redemption isn't immunity. Just then, Tyler Moss, the former security lead who had been removed earlier, re-entered the lounge with 2 corporate HR escorts. The room stilled. Vanessa turned to him. You were dismissed, Tyler. I know, he replied quietly. I'm not here to fight it. One of the HR officers handed Vanessa a sealed envelope. His statement. Vanessa opened it. Inside was a typed confession, and beneath it a handwritten note. I enabled a culture of silence. I flagged people based on looks, not behavior. This job gave me authority, and I used it to protect the wrong people. Please use my actions as a training case. I want my failure to mean something. Calvin looked over her shoulder. That's more honest than I expected. Vanessa turned to Tyler. Do you understand the damage you caused I do now? He said. Then go, she replied. Your next job is to remember that silence has a cost. The HR team escorted him out. Vanessa turned to Carla. Upload Tyler's statement to our training archive. Mandatory review for all new hires. Yes, ma'am. At that moment, a client who had remained seated near the espresso bar the entire time, an elderly white woman named Mrs. Lansing, stood and walked forward. I used to think this place was perfect, she said. It looked clean. It spoke softly. It handed me coffee before appointments, but I never saw what was underneath. She looked to Vanessa. Until now. I watched you walk in. Get humiliated, and not once did you raise your voice. You let their own words convict them. Vanessa nodded respectfully. Thank you for staying. I'm not just staying, Mrs. Lansing said. I'm transferring my late husband's endowment account into the Summit Equity Fund. Gasps rippled. That's nearly $6 million, Calvin whispered. Mrs. Lansing smiled. And I want Zara to be the first consultant on the equity committee. Zara's mouth dropped. Me, you've lived it, Mrs. Lansing said. That's more valuable than any spreadsheet. Power had not just reversed, it had evolved. Carla's voice returned. Vanessa, we've just received an internal memo from the National Oversight Committee. They're requesting a full case study of what happened today to be used in national DEI training across all partner institutions. Keith exhaled. This isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a template. Vanessa replied. Then let's make it the most uncomfortable template they've ever studied. Then came the twist. Carla's voice suddenly tense. Vanessa, Lisa Newman just walked into our Fort Lauderdale branch. The room snapped alert. She's trying to use her regional status to access her retirement files. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Is she speaking to staff? Yes. She's claiming today was an internal dispute. Says she'll be reinstated. Vanessa walked to the center of the lounge and tapped her tablet. Connect me to the branch manager. Now. A second later, a voice came through. Hello, this is Jason Fields, branch lead at Fort Lauderdale. This is Vanessa Clark, she said, calm and clear. As of this moment, Lisa Newman has been terminated from Summit Wealth Bank. She has no authority. No reinstatement is pending. Deny access to all systems, and please escort her out. Jason hesitated. Yes, ma'am. Understood. Vanessa tapped again. This is what reversal looks like, she said. Not just reclaiming power, but preventing it from returning to the hands that abused it. And with that, the marble floor once polished with privilege now bore the footsteps of those rewriting its future. The Summit Wealth Bank Miami branch didn't feel like a bank anymore. It felt like a crossroads where hierarchy had collapsed, silence had surrendered, and something entirely new was preparing to take its place. Vanessa Clark stood at the head of the long marble conference table, but this time she didn't stand alone. Around her sat Zara Brooks, Calvin Holt, Maya Reed, Miguel Alvarez, Anya Malik, and two newly arrived representatives from Summit's Community Ethics Board. None of them wore power suits. None of them carried titles carved in brass. But every one of them had lived the problem, and now they were here to lead the solution. We're not just filling empty seats, Vanessa said, scanning their faces. We're building a new table. Calvin leaned forward. How do we make sure it doesn't just become the same thing with new names? Zara answered before Vanessa could. We don't let power get comfortable. We rotate leadership. No single gatekeeper. No silent veto. Vanessa nodded. Agreed. Starting now, the client equity team will operate on rotating co-leads. Bi-monthly rotations. No executive override. Keith, seated at the edge of the room, looked impressed. Even you. Especially me, Vanessa replied. If I'm immune to feedback, I've already failed. Then came the formal restructuring. Vanessa tapped her tablet. A 3D org chart expanded on the wall screen. The positions once labeled VP Senior Partner and Executive Liaison had been deleted. In their place, Client Equity Officer, Public Trust Coordinator, Bias Watch Analyst. Under each title, names not of career executives, but of survivors. Maya Reed's name appeared under Public Trust, Miguel's under Internal Bias Auditing, Zara's under Client Equity, Calvin under Ethics Advisory, Anya under Human Engagement Systems. Each box lit up green as Carla's voice confirmed from the other end. Appointments finalized, salary adjusted, role protocols active. Miguel stared at the screen. I've never had a title before. You've always had purpose, Vanessa replied. Now it's recognized. Then came the unexpected visitor. A knock at the glass door. Everyone turned. It was Richard Langford, the former trainer, who had once proudly installed the very protocols they were now dismantling. But this time, he didn't enter with confidence. He entered with a box. I cleaned out my old files, he said. Everything I ever taught, slides, worksheets, scripts. I marked the ones that need to be burned, and I highlighted the few that might still be worth evolving. Vanessa gestured him in. Come sit. He hesitated. I don't deserve a seat at this table. Zara looked up. Then take one and earn it. Richard sat slowly. My generation taught image. Yours teaches insight. If I can help unteach what I once believed was harmless, I'd like to. Vanessa reached into the box and pulled out an old binder Client Profile Training Summit Wealth 2008. The first line on the first page read, Perceived risk is often as valuable as verified data. She stared at it. This was the blueprint. Calvin said quietly, No wonder the building cracked. Vanessa looked up. Then let's start with the demolition. But then another twist. Carla's voice returned. Vanessa, CNN Business just published a story. Full feature on what happened here. You've been named the most courageous CEO in finance. It's gone global. Keith whistled. They're going to ask for interviews, speeches books. Vanessa didn't react. Zara looked worried. Are you okay? Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't do this for headlines. I did it because I walked into a building I owned and got treated like a criminal. She stood and walked to the windows that overlooked downtown Miami. The question now, she said, is not whether we've fired the wrong people. It's whether we're ready to hire the right ones. Anya asked. Where do we begin? Vanessa turned. With everyone who's ever been told they weren't polished enough, rich enough, or safe enough. Everyone who had the qualifications, but not the look. Everyone who stayed quiet, and now wants to speak. Then Carla's voice broke in sharper this time. Vanessa, we just got an email from the National Bankers Equity Council. They want you to draft the first industry-wide dignity compliance framework. They say what happened here could become federal standard. Gasps. Maya whispered, You're not just changing Summit. You're changing banking. But Vanessa shook her head. No, she said. We are. Then she turned to each new leader in the room, to the woman who was denied for being too young, to Zara, to the man who was flagged for being too black, to Calvin, to the teller who kept his head down while the system walked over clients, to Miguel, to the client who stood up when it wasn't safe, to Maya, to the intern who questioned silence and chose action, to Anya, and even to the trainer who taught the wrong things but showed up to unlearn them, to Richard. You are the leadership now. And just then, Carla's voice again. Vanessa, they're asking what title you want for this new program. Vanessa smiled. Call it the silent majority's turn. The very structure of Summit Wealth Bank was under reconstruction not with hammers, but with policy. The following Monday, Vanessa Clark stood inside the main boardroom of Summit's national headquarters in New York. Gone were the frosted glass partitions of exclusivity. Gone were the mission statements that praised legacy over transparency. In their place was a 20-foot LED screen flashing a single title, Summit Equity Charter Final Draft for Ratification. Below it, a bold subtitle built by survivors, reviewed by clients, led by truth. Vanessa turned to face the gathered executives. This was not the same board that had once ignored complaints from the Miami branch. Many of them were new installed during the fallout. Some had resigned voluntarily. Others had been asked to. Behind Vanessa stood the new leadership committee, Zara Brooks, Calvin Holt, Maya Reed, Anya Malik, and Miguel Alvarez. Each carried binders filled with real-life testimonies, reform drafts, and policy clauses rewritten by those who had lived through the discrimination Summit once denied existed. The purpose of this charter, Vanessa began, is not to restore trust. It's to earn it. From scratch. A murmur of approval circled the table. She continued, every client deserves the same dignity as the next, regardless of attire, accent, or appearance. Every employee deserves a system that doesn't require silence to succeed. Then she clicked her tablet. The screen changed to a list of initiatives. Bias flag reporting, transparent escalation paths. Mandatory verbal conduct audits. Quarterly. Public client equity scores, branch by branch. Whistleblower protections for staff and clients. Mandatory video testimony reviews in training. Keith Morris, watching remotely from Miami, sent a message through the boardroom chat. This is the blueprint we all needed, not just for banks, but for justice. A board member raised her hand. Ms. Clark, the verbal conduct audit. How will it work in practice? Vanessa gestured to Maya. Maya stepped forward, voice calm but steady. Clients will have the right to request a verbal audit review after any appointment. They don't need to justify it. If they feel dismissed, judged, or profiled, they can flag it. Zara added, a team of independent reviewers, some internal, some external, will review tone phrasing, body language. It's not just what was said, it's how. The board looked stunned. You're measuring how people are spoken to, one asked. Yes, Vanessa said, because discrimination doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Then came the unexpected twist. Carla Evans' voice came over the internal line. Vanessa, we've received a challenge from a coalition of private banks. They claim the Summit Equity Charter is performative and unrealistic in a competitive industry. Vanessa didn't flinch. Prepare a response. Zara raised an eyebrow. Want me to help write it? Not yet, Vanessa said. They need more than words. She tapped the screen. A new chart appeared. Client transfers to Summit, December 96. Hours, PLUD 42, 800 accounts. Total net worth migrated 790 million. Gasps filled the room. Maya whispered, they don't want the reform, but they'll have to compete with it. Vanessa turned to the board. We won't respond with defensiveness. We'll respond with results. Another hand went up. What about your internal talent pipeline? How do we train new hires into this new culture? Calvin took the mic this time. We've created the Summit Reentry Fellowship, a paid year-long mentorship for individuals who were historically denied banking roles due to cultural mismatch, lack of pedigree, or previous bias flags. We start with 100 fellows, each mentored by someone who once survived the system. The room was still. Listening. Then Vanessa added, and we'll require all managers to undergo reverse mentorship for 6 weeks. They'll report directly to client survivors, learning from those who once sat across the table in silence. Silence fell again. Then applause. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't performative. It was the sound of realization. Vanessa walked back to the table. You asked me what title I wanted for this. The board voted to call it a charter, but I want it to feel more like a living document, something that breathes with the people it serves. Carla's voice came in once more. Vanessa, your father just joined the internal live stream. Vanessa paused, then smiled softly. Put him through. The screen split. On one side, the Summit Equity Charter. On the other, a weathered, kind-eyed man seated in a modest office wearing a blue button-down and a quiet grin. Hi, Dad, she said. I saw the headlines, he said. Saw the live stream, too. Vanessa exhaled. I didn't expect you to watch. I watched every second, he replied. And I just have one question. She nodded. What is it? Do you realize what you've done? Vanessa looked around the room, then back at him. Yes, she said. I've made sure no one else gets told to leave a place they already own. What started as a confrontation in a single banking lounge was now a movement crossing city lines, class barriers, and even industries. Within 72 hours of Vanessa Clark activating the Summit Equity Charter, something strange began happening across America. Silence gave way to stories. People who had once kept quiet about being profiled, dismissed, or humiliated by professional systems now found a vocabulary and a leader. On Twitter, the hashtag #DignityBanking began trending globally, not as a slogan, but as a revelation. I was once asked to speak to security before opening my account. Guess who I was there to deposit money for the bank's VP? Dignity Banking. My father wore overalls to his meeting with a private advisor. The teller asked if he was delivering something. He had $2.3 to invest. Dignity Banking. Just watched Vanessa Clark build what banks should have been from the start. No one should need a headline to be heard. Dignity Banking. And then came the first open letter. It wasn't from a politician or a corporate CEO. It came from 12-year-old Talia Monroe, a black middle schooler from Detroit, who watched Vanessa's live stream with her grandmother. Her letter, scribbled in a school notebook, was shared by her teacher. It read, Dear Ms. Clark, I saw them tell you to leave your own bank. I saw you stand there and not yell, but win anyway. My grandma said that's called grace. I think it's called power. I want to be like you. The post exploded. By midday, Talia's note had been reposted by Oprah, Ava DuVernay, Shonda Rhimes, and Barack Obama. But it wasn't just celebrities who were listening. It was school boards requesting the Summit case study be added to civic curriculum. It was HR departments asking for training materials. It was airports, coffee chains, and retail giants asking the same question. Can you help us audit dignity too? Back at Summit headquarters, the floodgates of feedback poured in. Keith Morris, sitting beside Zara Brooks in their temporary media response suite, shook his head in disbelief. We've had over 11,000 inbound requests for your speaking schedule. Vanessa didn't blink. Tell them we're not giving speeches, we're giving structure. Calvin added. Requests for job applications have tripled. Most of them. People who left finance. People who were driven out. Carla's voice came in over the intercom. Vanessa, the New York Times just published their front-page piece, "The CEO Who Rebuilt Banking from a Glass Shard." Zara smiled. "That's poetic. It's accurate." Maya said. She shattered it from the inside. Then came the unexpected twist. "Carla, again Vanessa. We've received a request from the White House. They want to meet." "Privately." Silence. Then Keith asked. "The President, his advisory council," Carla said. "He wants you to help draft a new national equity compliance model, not just for banks, for all federal agencies." Zara whispered. "This isn't just a story now." "No," Calvin replied. "It's a blueprint." Vanessa nodded slowly. "Tell them yes, but under one condition." Carla waited. "We don't start in Washington," Vanessa said. "We start in Miami." Carla replied, "I'll relay it." Then Vanessa looked to the team. "We don't let this become a moment. We make it a mirror." Maya stepped forward. "We've got hundreds of new volunteers asking to help build community chapters, teachers, retired judges, former clients. What do we tell them?" "Tell them this," Vanessa said. "Tell them leadership is no longer appointed. It's activated." Then came the moment no one expected. Richard Langford, former corporate trainer, now volunteer reform advocate, entered the media floor holding a box. "What's that?" Calvin asked. He opened it. Inside, dozens of old client profiling guides from other financial institutions. Anonymous sources had begun mailing them in. Quietly. Willingly. "They want you to burn this," Richard said. They said, "We can't lead the change, but she can." Zara stared. "It's happening." Miguel nodded. "People are realizing they were part of the machine, and they're trying to dismantle it before it's too late." Vanessa closed the box and placed it on the floor beside her. She looked at her team. No longer survivors, no longer just witnesses. "You know what happens next," she said. Anya answered, steady now. "We take the flame that burned us, and we light the path for others." Outside the glass windows, the city buzzed, but inside, something louder resonated, awakening. And it wasn't a headline anymore. It was a movement. 3 weeks after Vanessa Clark rewrote the story of Summit Wealth Bank, the ripple effects weren't just visible, they were seismic. It began with copycat reform. First, Sterling National, a major competitor, publicly announced its own client equity audit. Then, Mid-Atlantic First. A bank that had never even acknowledged bias in its history quietly suspended 2 regional executives and announced a full internal review. But what truly stunned the industry was what happened next. Cobalt Finance, a luxury wealth management firm previously infamous for its invitation-only approach, announced it would begin walk-in welcome hours at all its branches, no dress code, no appointment, no asset minimum. When reporters asked what prompted the change, CEO Raul Esperanza replied simply, "We saw what happened at Summit. We saw what happened after. And we realized the future was already here. We were just the ones behind." Keith Morris read the quote aloud in Summit's media office. "They're quoting us now." Calvin Holt smiled. "They should be. This isn't just policy, it's pressure. It's proof." Miguel Alvarez was compiling data. "Vanessa, we've received 34 formal requests from non-financial institutions asking for adaptation of the Dignity Framework hospitals, universities, real estate firms, even a major airline." Vanessa didn't blink. "Send them the starter kit, then invite them to sit down with the people we used to ignore." Carla's voice came through the speaker. "And we just got word from the International Banking Standards Coalition. They want to host you in Geneva, speak on ethics and equity as part of next quarter's policy summit." Zara looked up. "You're international now." No, Vanessa replied. The idea is international. I'm just the proof that it works. But the most unexpected echo came from within the walls of corporate power itself. A board member from Hudson and Hart, one of the oldest investment houses on Wall Street, reached out directly. She was anonymous at first sending a letter. I've sat on a board that profiled behind curtains of legacy. I watched gifted applicants get turned away for lack of polish. And I said nothing. Watching you standing in your own bank, accused of not belonging, I saw myself. And I hated what I saw. I want to help burn it down, from the inside. The letter ended unsigned, but a week later, Hudson and Hart quietly canceled 5 partnerships with firms that had been flagged for discriminatory practices. Vanessa folded the letter into a new file marked Whistleblowers Rising. Then came the twist. Carla's voice turned sharp. Vanessa, emergency alert. One of our partner firms, Clearstream Holdings, has just gone into blackout mode. They've pulled all public access to employee directories, paused customer service lines, and suspended their DEI committee. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. What triggered it? A viral clip. A client at their Beverly Hills branch recorded being asked to show 3 forms of ID because he looked underfunded. The clip references Summit. The caption, "She warned you. We watched her win. You didn't listen." Zara covered her mouth. Oh my God. They're not just watching us. They're calling others out with our name. Keith added, "You've become a standard, a measure. People are holding the industry up next to your model like a mirror." Vanessa took a breath. Then let's polish that mirror. She turned to Calvin. Schedule a summit. Industry-wide. 1 month from today. Invite everyone, competitors, partners, even critics. No titles. No keynote speeches. Just survivors and executives in the same room. Miguel asked, "What's the agenda?" Truth, Vanessa said. And 1 question. If you rebuilt your system from scratch, who would you design it for? Keith smiled. That's going to make some people squirm. Good, Vanessa replied. Reform should be uncomfortable. Then came another twist, soft but stunning. Anya Malik, the young associate who had once sat in silence at Summit's Miami branch, stepped forward, holding a handwritten list. I took the liberty of tracking down every former Summit client who closed their accounts in the last 5 years, citing discrimination, she said. There's 312 of them. I want to personally call each one. Vanessa stared at her. Anya continued. Not to win them back, just to tell them they were right, that someone heard them, that we're sorry. Silence. Then Maya stood. I'll help you. So did Miguel. Me too. Even Zara. Let's rotate the calls. Vanessa said nothing at first. Then she picked up her phone, pressed a button, and opened the team-wide mic. This is Vanessa Clark, she said. Effective immediately, every branch in our network will assign 1 hour each week to what we call the restoration desk. She continued. During this hour, all calls, all emails, all walk-ins are reviewed not for sales, but for missed dignity, for flags we ignored, for voices we didn't hear. The team sat in quiet awe. Vanessa ended the call with a final sentence. Because the future of finance isn't innovation, it's integrity. It started with a ping, a simple notification, one that most CEOs would dismiss during a meeting. But Vanessa Clark wasn't most CEOs. She glanced at the subject line on her tablet, recovered internal file. Confidential Archive Summit Origin Protocols. Carla Vanessa said quietly, still seated in her corner of the Ethics Division's glass office. Where did this come from? Carla's voice was immediate. Our digital forensics team swept Tyler Moss's archive directories. This was buried under an encrypted folder called Legacy Vault. It required 3 admin keys to unlock. Vanessa sat forward. Open it. The file bloomed into dozens of subfolders, all labeled with dates spanning nearly 2 decades. Inside transcripts, memos, meeting notes from Summit's earliest internal leadership summits, long before Vanessa's acquisition. One folder stood out. Client Filtration Strategy. 2006. Vanessa clicked. What she read next stole the air from the room. To preserve institutional image, frontline advisors are instructed to triage clients based on attire value over just $500, last names not tied to high-risk regions, accent clarity and command tone when speaking, vehicle observed upon arrival, skin tone to portfolio ratio, scoring system internal use only. She stopped reading. A silence fell so complete that even the hum of the building seemed to hush. "Carla," she said finally, "has anyone else seen this?" No, Carla replied. "You're the first." It was tagged ineligible for internal audit by former executives, the same group that signed off on Lisa's promotion. Vanessa stood. "I need the board. Now." Within 30 minutes, every senior member of Summit's new leadership and compliance team was assembled in the live-streaming boardroom, including regional heads, whistleblowers, legal counsel, and 2 federal ethics observers. Zara sat near the monitor, her face tense. Calvin stood with arms folded. Maya and Miguel flanked the table, jaws tight. Vanessa didn't preface what she was about to show. She just tapped her screen. And the words spoke for themselves. The room went still. One by one, heads turned downward, then back up. Faces changed, some horrified, some furious, others barely holding composure. Keith whispered. They wrote it down. They documented the racism. Vanessa said, "This is no longer about bad actors. This was architecture." One of the regional directors, a black woman named Dana Pierce, stood slowly. "I've worked at Summit for 11 years. You're telling me I've been building my career on top of this?" Vanessa nodded once. "And now you're the one helping tear it down." Then came the twist. Carla's voice entered. "Vanessa, we traced signatures from the 2006 memo. One of them is still on the board." Gasps rippled. Who, Maya asked. Carla hesitated. Harold Fine, current chair of investor strategy, senior most advisor in the firm. Zara blinked. He was in the room when Lisa got promoted. Calvin slammed his folder shut. He knew. Vanessa's face went still. "Bring him in." Moments later, Harold entered, gray-haired, tailored suit smile, as polished as the marble floors he'd once overseen. "Vanessa," he said warmly, "I heard there's an urgent matter." Vanessa didn't shake his hand. She turned the screen to him. "Do you recognize this document?" He looked at it. A flicker crossed his face, too fast for most to notice. But Vanessa caught it. Harold adjusted his cuff. That was a different time. Strategy has evolved." "No," Vanessa replied. "The words evolved. The values stayed the same." Maya stepped forward. "You built a scoring system based on skin tone." Harold held up a hand. "We never enforced it." "But you wrote it," Zara said. "You normalized it. You let it shape policy." Then the final blow. Vanessa pulled out a hard copy of Summit's 2015 hiring algorithm. In this file, also traced to you, is a code line that deprioritized candidates from zip codes with high foreclosure rates. Those were majority Black and Latino communities after the crash. Harold looked uneasy. "We were protecting investors." "No," Calvin said. "You were protecting prejudice." Vanessa turned to the board. "I motion to remove Harold Fine from all Summit operations, effective immediately, and submit his conduct to the National Regulatory Board for ethical misconduct." The vote was unanimous. Harold was escorted out, quietly, permanently. Then Vanessa looked around the room. We thought we were reforming an institution, but what we were really doing was unearthing a rot that started before any of us got here. Carla added Vanessa. I've already uploaded the files to the Federal Banking Oversight Commission and the National Ethics Archive. Zara looked up. What happens now? Vanessa's voice was low but resolute. We don't just build new rules, we expose the old ones, publicly, permanently. And with that, she tapped one final command. On every Summit Wealth public-facing branch screen, a new message appeared. Summit Wealth Bank acknowledges past practices rooted in prejudice. We are no longer that system. We are what we're rebuilding. With you. For you. Vanessa Clark didn't hold a press conference. She didn't walk down a carpet. She didn't take a victory lap. The morning after Harold Fine was permanently removed from Summit Wealth Bank, Vanessa arrived at the Miami branch just before opening a loan, dressed in a gray blazer, black flats, and no entourage. The building was quiet, not tense, just different. Inside, the layout hadn't changed. The marble still gleamed. The plants still stood in uniform rows, but the energy was unmistakably new. The first person she saw was Anya Malik, placing a new placard above the client check-in station. It read, "Welcome. You are not being evaluated. You're being served." Vanessa smiled gently. Simple. Powerful. Anya turned, startled. "Ma'am, I mean, Vanessa. I didn't know you'd be coming today." "I never stopped," Vanessa replied. "Today, I just enter through the front door." The two stood in stillness for a moment, not because there was nothing to say, but because so much had already been said and done. In the last month, the bank hadn't just fired people. It had rehired principals, structures, purpose. Every Summit branch now held a restoration hour clients could walk in and speak to real humans with real authority about the times they felt unheard. No paperwork required. Every teller had completed verbal sensitivity and bias recovery training led not by HR, but by former clients who had once been dismissed. Every manager was now required to take part in reverse mentorship circles for 3 weeks a quarter, learning from those they used to evaluate. Vanessa walked into the new equity lab, where Zara Brooks sat with a team of interns. "Today, we're auditing responses from last week's restoration hours," Zara explained. "We're not measuring satisfaction, we're tracking regret. Moments where staff wished they had said more. Done more." Vanessa asked, "How do you quantify something like that?" Zara smiled. "We don't. We listen. We let them say it in their own words. Then we reflect it back." And that was the heart of it. This wasn't a victory made of sound bites or media praise. This was a quiet, permanent shift. The kind you didn't always see in headlines, but felt in hallways, in new habits, in spaces that once excluded now making room. Vanessa stopped by the coffee bar. Miguel Alvarez was helping a visually impaired client complete a voice-navigated transaction, a new service they had launched 2 weeks ago. When the client finished and smiled, Miguel simply said, "You let us know if anything doesn't feel right. Not just what's wrong, what doesn't feel right." The client nodded. "That's new. That's good." Vanessa watched it all unfold and thought, this is how justice travels slow, grounded, constant. Then came the twist. Carla's voice came softly through Vanessa's earpiece. "Vanessa, I wasn't going to interrupt your visit, but you'll want to know. The final vote just came in." Vanessa stepped into an empty conference room and pulled up the encrypted feed. Carla's face appeared. The Federal Banking Oversight Commission has officially adopted the Summit Dignity Charter as a national standard. Vanessa blinked. Carla smiled. Effective next quarter, every federally insured bank must meet minimum benchmarks derived from your model verbal conduct audits whistleblower protections, restoration protocols, and public equity tracking. Zara, overhearing from the hall, gasped. "They made it real, they made it policy," Carla said. "And they credited you." Vanessa shook her head. "Credit the silence that spoke louder than privilege ever did." Then Carla added, "Oh, and one more thing. The Department of Education just contacted us. They want to name the new school they're building in Liberty City." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Why they want to name it after you? Vanessa Clark School for Integrity in Leadership." Vanessa didn't respond right away. She simply sat down, hands in her lap. Not smiling, not crying, just breathing. In and out. Because this victory wasn't about applause. It was about space. Space reclaimed. Voices restored. Names remembered. Later that evening, she exited the Miami branch the way she came alone. No cameras, no chance. Just one woman walking down the steps of a building that once told her she didn't belong. Now it carried her name on every floor. Not in gold letters, but in the way people spoke, the way they listened, the way they stayed. 6 months later, no one in the industry called it the Summit Scandal anymore. They called it the Clark Shift. What began as a humiliating moment in a private client lounge had reshaped not just Summit Wealth Bank, but the very idea of who institutions serve and who gets to lead them. Vanessa Clark sat in a modest auditorium at the Liberty City Community Center. Beside her were Zara Maya, Calvin Anya, and Miguel. No longer just team members, but legacy carriers. They weren't waiting for applause. They were waiting for something far rarer. Acknowledgement. On stage stood Talia Monroe. Now 13, her voice confident as she spoke to a room full of students, parents, bankers, journalists, and officials. You don't have to yell to lead. You don't need a title to be right. You just need truth and the courage to hold it steady. The room rose in quiet applause. Talia's final line was a quote. A direct lift from the day Vanessa had walked back into her bank, raised no voice, and turned the institution inside out. And now, Talia was the first student ambassador of the newly inaugurated Vanessa Clark School for Integrity in Leadership. The school sat less than 3 miles from the branch where Vanessa had once been told, "You don't belong here." The irony didn't sting. It healed. After the ceremony, Zara caught up with Vanessa in the hallway. "You really going to do it?" she asked. Vanessa smiled. "Step down as CEO." "Yeah." Zara blinked. "But it's yours." "No," Vanessa said. "It was never about owning a bank. It was about owning the moment, the story, and giving it back to the people who shaped it." Calvin walked over, grinning. "Then I guess we should prep the succession announcement." "It's already written," Vanessa said, handing him a sealed envelope. "The new CEO isn't from private equity, isn't from the Ivy League." She started as a floor assistant and rewrote the onboarding process from scratch. Calvin looked stunned. Anya Vanessa nodded. "She's ready." Meanwhile, Maya was reading the latest publication of Finance Forward. The cover story, The Quiet Revolution, How Clark Reed Brooks & Co.'s Rewrote Capitalism's Human Code. She laughed, holding it up. "Apparently, we're a company now." Miguel added, "There's already a documentary crew asking for our story. I told them they'd have to sit through a full restoration hour before we'd even talk to them." Vanessa smiled. "Good. Make them earn it." Then came the final ripple. Carla's voice rang through Vanessa's personal line. "You're going to want to see this." A message had arrived. From Edward Pierce. Zara glanced at the tablet. That Edward Vanessa nodded. She opened it. "Vanessa, I was wrong. Not just in what I said, but in what I believed I had the right to say. I've been banned from 12 institutions. Good. I deserved it. But last week, my daughter walked into Summit Your Summit. She was served with dignity. No one asked about her father. That's how I knew you won. Not because I lost, but because she didn't have to fight a battle you already ended. Edward. The room stayed quiet. Vanessa didn't respond. She didn't forward the message. She didn't post it. She just placed the tablet down and said, "Let's get back to work." Later that evening, Vanessa returned to the Miami branch, not for oversight, not for meetings, but for something quieter. She walked to the marble wall where client portraits now hung. But these weren't donors. They were people who had spoken up during the collapse. Zara, Maya, Calvin, Anya, Miguel, Talia. Even Richard Langford, the former trainer who returned to teach the re-education program that replaced his own legacy. Underneath their photos, a plaque read, "These are not faces of perfection. These are voices that challenged it. We don't honor power here. We honor the people who told it the truth." Vanessa placed her hand on the plaque, then turned to leave. As she exited, a young man entering the building held the door for her. She nodded politely. He did a double take. "Wait, are you?" Vanessa smiled. "No need for names. Just make sure they treat you right." He grinned. "They already do." And just like that, she walked into the street, not toward a camera or a boardroom, but into a world she had helped change, quietly, permanently, and on her terms. Vanessa Clark never set out to be a symbol. She didn't walk into the Summit Wealth Bank lounge that day, thinking she'd dismantle a legacy built on exclusion. She wasn't looking for confrontation. She was there to make a withdrawal. But instead, she deposited something far more valuable into the fabric of an entire system dignity. And she never once raised her voice. Her power wasn't in volume. It was in presence, in the way she stood still when they accused her, in the way she didn't demand an apology, she demanded accountability, in the way she never said, "I'm the CEO," until the truth had already exposed everyone who assumed she wasn't. The lesson wasn't in revenge, it was in restraint, it was in restoration. Vanessa changed a bank not by shouting down its employees, but by showing them what they couldn't hide from their own bias, written in emails, buried in policies, and baked into the culture. And then she replaced it not with new buzzwords, but with a new backbone. Under her leadership, the Summit Dignity Charter became federal standard. Under her guidance, the people once humiliated Zara Maya. Miguel, Calvin, Anya became leaders, teachers, architects of reform. Under her silence, a nation listened louder. But her legacy didn't stop at policies or training protocols. It lived in the choices made by everyday people long after the headlines faded. It lived in Anya Malik, the former floor assistant now seated as Summit's CEO, not because Vanessa chose her, but because she earned it. It lived in every restoration hour across the country, where bankers sat across from clients and asked, "How did we make you feel?" And then actually waited for the answer. It lived in school children like Talia Monroe, who now carried notebooks with quotes from Vanessa in the margins instead of math formulas. It lived in every security guard who now asked, "Can I assist you?" instead of "What are you doing here?" It lived in a new language of leadership, one rooted not in charisma, but in clarity. And above all, it lived in a quiet revolution that no longer needed Vanessa's name to sustain it. Because true legacy doesn't leave behind footprints, it leaves behind frameworks. The systems that once measured value by wealth now measured it by respect. The doors that once filtered people by assumptions now stayed open by design. And the voices that were once silenced now sat at the front of every boardroom, every hiring committee, every conversation about what comes next. Vanessa Clark didn't burn it down. She outlasted it. She stood in the fire, documented the fuel, and rewired the flame into a beacon, so that no one would ever again be told, "You don't belong here." And if they were, the response would no longer need to be shouted. It would already be written into the walls. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.